Good morning, everyone, and welcome to May's Audit Committee. I'll start by going through apologies.
We've got no apologies today, Convener.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Okay. Moving on to the minutes of the February meeting. Do we have, firstly, any comments or updates you wish to? No? Any matters arising? Are we happy to agree the minutes? Thank you. Next item is the rolling action log. Do we have any questions at all regarding the rolling action log? No. Okay, going into the agenda fully. We'll start item 5, and I believe it's yourself, Isabel, to present.
Yes, morning. You're going to hear quite a bit from me this morning, unfortunately. So thank you, Convener, and good morning, everybody. The purpose of this report is to provide you with the findings from our recent external quality assessment of our internal audit section and its compliance with the public sector internal audit standards. As committee is aware, these standards were replaced in April 2025 with the global internal audit standards. However, this assessment commenced prior to the introduction of the new standards. Paragraphs 3.1 to 3.4 provide you with some background to the assessment and the related compliance with those standards. Paragraphs 4.1 to 4.3 explain the process as well as provide you with the results of the assessment, which I hope you will agree provides the committee with independent assurance on how we perform our work. You can see the full report written by the Service Manager for Audit and Risk Management at Fife Council at Appendix 1, with the improvement action recommendations in Appendix D, which is at the very end of the report. Progress on these recommendations will be reported as part of future assessment updates. I'd finally draw your attention to the recommendations at paragraph 2.1, which are to note the findings and the action plan from the external quality assessment, note the overall independent conclusion that Falkirk Council internal audit section fully conforms with the public sector internal audit standards in 11 areas and generally conforms in 3 areas, and also records its thanks to the Fife Council internal audit team for carrying out the assessment. I'd like to express my own thanks to the Fife Council team for the work undertaken, and also to the Falkirk Council internal audit team, and particularly Sarah, who is our senior internal auditor, for their dedication to improving all that we do in internal audit and for their hard work and support throughout this lengthy process. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Isabel. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener, and thanks, Isabel. I think we should, again, I know that Isabel said that, but from the point of view of the committee is note that the independent assessors found Falkirk Council's internal audit fully conformed with the public sector internal audit standards in 11 areas and generally in 3. So that puts us in a very good position, I would say. So I think we should note that. And it's a very positive position. Within the report, it did talk about it took a long time for the external assessor to complete the process. And maybe a wee bit more comment on that from Isabel. And the judgment of generally conforms for the standards of proficiency due professional care went to the moderation panel. I'm not going to even attempt to say that acronym, I'm afraid, in August, alongside our judgments. And while the panel agreed that Falkirk Council's judgment of fully conforms, it would have been appropriate the assessment team remained with the original judgment of generally conforms. I think it would be helpful to have Isabel maybe give a wee bit more of an explanation about that and about the timescales of going back and forward, and if there's a way that could perhaps be improved upon in the future?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that's fine. The timing, yeah, there's no denying it did take a long time. The points probably I would like to make is that the external assessment is a hugely significant piece of work for any internal audit manager to undertake. Not only is it on top of the day job, it is assessing an entire section's work every 5 years and all of their processes. It takes a sample of all our audit work. It looks at the working papers we have in place. It looks at all our guidance that we have in place, our audit manual, our charter. So and then it assesses against a lot of different standards. It shouldn't have taken as long as it did. And I'm not fully aware of the reasons why it took as long as it did. However, having been on the other side and having to perform one of these assessments, it took me a lengthy period of time to undertake the one that I undertook for Dundee City Council, because it is so vast and you're still trying to do your day job at the same time. The lessons learned for me, which hopefully can take forward into the next round, which will be called EQA3, which will cover over the next 5-year period. The lessons learned that I've taken is that it's wider. It takes more than just me to undertake it, and you need to involve the team. So in able to do that, you need to take time out of your audit plan and have that squared off so that you can undertake that work and have the team involved in doing it, to try and break it up and to reduce the timeframes that are involved in undertaking the review. The additional timescales, so and I don't work in Fife Council obviously, so I'm not sure of all their reasons, but I think they had resourcing issues in undertaking the review at that time, and there was a lot of stopping and starting with different people coming on board to do it. The moderation panel is offered when, like any other audit, like an audit we do, we're always seeking for clarification from the auditee and looking for them to provide more evidence if they feel that there's more to give, or that our assessment is maybe not accurate or providing the full picture. And that's what we did in this instance. We had that same process where we went back and forward on quite a few different areas where we provided more evidence. We tried to understand their point of view. There were just a few remaining issues where the moderation panel came in and they considered those. And I'm glad to say that in the majority of those instances, where the moderation panel felt there were changes that could be made to the report in support of our stance, the Fife Council Audit Service Manager was happy to do so. There was just that one sticking point that you mentioned, which was standard 1200. And it basically boils down to the report is Fife Council's report, the Fife Council Audit Manager's report. So that ownership sits with them with regards to what goes in that report. The guidance actually says that it has to be up to the assessor to make that evidence-based judgment. And when they took into account everything that I had provided up to that point, what the moderation panel felt and considered that it could be given a fully conforms, they decided that because they had made those 2 recommendations, which off the top of my head were recommendations 2 and 3, that because they'd made those recommendations, they considered that it fell into the generally conforms category. So that there was a few months back and forward going through all of that process, which again added to the time scales. In overall terms, we're happy with the report that we got back. Most of our points were taken into consideration, and you will see from the Appendix D, the recommendations, we were happy to accept those recommendations and put in place the things that had been asked of us, and some of that was actually already underway. So in the bigger, broader sense, it is a really good report for us, and there was just that sticking point towards the end. Hopefully that covers what you were asking.
Thanks, Isabel. That was helpful to have that understanding. If I could just ask a supplementary, and I apologise, I may have already asked this at some other point in the past. Is this a voluntary, taking on this additional piece of work of peer assessment? Is this voluntary, or is there some form of obligation on local authorities, audit committees to do that on behalf of others?
We chose to be part of this. It's almost like a reciprocal agreement, because if we were to have this work undertaken by another body, it would cost us considerable amount. Some in the local authority, internal audit community, the conversation has been around costing up to something like £25,000 for another outside body to come in and do that work. So if we are part of the reciprocal arrangement where we undertake one and we receive one, there isn't obviously a cost involved. There's a significant resource and capacity potential issue there, but there isn't a cost. It also being part of that arrangement is also, it increases our improvement, if you like, our chance of improving, because not only are we learning from the person that is the local authority that's assessing us and giving us maybe more good practice or tips, because we also undertake it, we are learning from another local authority through that process too. So there are a lot of benefits to it. I think to be transparent, obviously we also do Clackmannanshire Council work, so we have that same process for Clackmannanshire Council. So we have to undertake one and we have to receive one. And part of the issues that we faced at the time with this was we had a Clackmannanshire Council one underway as well. So we were receiving 2 assessments and undertaking one. So that's I probably wasn't aware of how intense it would be. And so for the next round, we'd definitely, as I said earlier, be putting more into it resources wise and actually making that part of our plan, because there's absolutely no other way other than what's actually happened in the length of time that it's taken.
Okay, thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Isabel. How often are these external audits carried out?
So we do an annual self-assessment, and we have to receive a external assessment within every 5 years. So obviously we have just received this one in April. So our hope is that we wouldn't be looking to be assessed again, certainly within the next 2 or 3 years, but it could be any time within the next 5, but up to 5. So my hope would be that we're looking towards the latter end of that. That's not to say that we won't have others to be involved in. As I've said earlier, we may have another one to undertake in that time frame, and we also will have the Clackmannanshire Council ones in that time frame as well.
Thank you, Isabel. I noted the external assessment team highlighted that the internal audit team were being asked to undertake several high risk assessments for the council. In their opinion, it high level respect for the council, which I also have and commend your team for. However, they noted, like I have on several occasions, the impact on resource. So I'm just noting at the moment, it'll be picked up later, that we still have concerns over the resource, especially health-wise for your team. But thank you for that.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, convener. Yes, and thank you, Isabel, for this very, as usual, very thorough report. Just have a couple of questions. Following on a bit from the question of the high risk assessments, how are we going to ensure, looking at page 26, how are we going to ensure that independence and objectivity are not undermined by the changes to the structures?
Page 26. That's the section on the annual governance
Yes.
statement. So this was
Yes.
one of our sticking points in finalising the review. And the way that we've dealt with it is by introducing some extra safeguarding measures. So it's a section around the annual governance statement, which is produced annually and goes as part of the annual accounts. That has historically always been produced within my team, and latterly it has been coordinated by the corporate risk coordinator within the team, and my involvement is around adding information from the last year on internal audit, fraud and risk. But the overall collation, coordination of that sits with that other person. So, and then there's a lot of, it goes out to various people, all the chief officers for their input and additions. A lot of the information within it is evidenced in other documentation that has gone to various committees. So there really aren't any big surprises because all that information is reported by other means. The potential issue is that my role could be seen as being impacted if, for example, there was negative information around my team, and I chose not to put that in for obvious reasons. So there is a potential risk that in my independence or the objectivity could be skewed. So we have introduced extra safeguarding measures, and we have documented them in our revised internal audit charter, which is coming up later in the agenda. So we can speak more then if you want to know more. But the safeguarding measures that have been introduced include more oversight by the Chief Finance Officer and the Chief Governance Officer. We're going to have an annual meeting where we go through all the points, and they have got access to all of the different information that we collate as part of the process, so that it will be more transparent. They had sight of all of this anyway. It's just more of a written down requirement in the charter. So yes, we've done it, and it's coming up later in the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel.
I think Amanda has something more to add to that.
Yeah, I think so. As Isabel said, the issue that's flagged in the EQA under independence and objectivity is it's not so much about anyone compromising Isabel's independence and objectivity. It's whether or not Isabel would be objective. I think in the annual governance statement, if there were issues within our arrangements for risk or for fraud or for internal audit, that she may not be objective enough to put that in. Now, I'm not concerned about that, and actually I think that issue and that risk would be there if any one person was responsible for the annual governance statement, but that's just not how it operates. Isabel oversees sort of as she said, our corporate risk coordinator, who does the majority of the collating and pulling the information together. As the directors, chief officers, we all have to complete annual assurance statements to flag up any particular issues that we're aware of. We'd expect to see that in the AGS. And then the AGS is very much a corporate responsibility. So we discuss it at CMT, we review what's in there. And as we've said before, when it's included in the accounts and those accounts come to Audit Committee for things like the annual governance statement and the management commentary, they should really reflect members' understanding of what's been reported throughout the course of the year. So they should be sort of familiar in a sense. You should be looking at it thinking, yep, that chimes with what I'm hearing in this committee or that report or whatever, or through whatever meeting. So as Isabel said, it has been helpful to have the review and that challenge to make us look at how we do things and say, well, where can we make improvements? But I certainly feel assured that Isabel's independence and objectivity is not, or the post, I suppose it's not Isabel specifically, but that isn't an issue for us.
Thank you for that. I think I wasn't personally in any way suggesting that wasn't there, but it's important for us to have the assurances that the background processes are in place to keep on top of that, particularly when it's been highlighted as an issue. So thank you for that, both Isabel and Amanda. My other question relates to page 47 and relates to the consultation process. There's a recommendation for broadening the consultation to include the views of members of Falkirk Council. And there's a deadline of 30th June 2026 for achieving that. But two questions about it. One is, how achievable is that deadline? The other is, can you give a bit more information about the ways in which members' views will be included and be sought and included?
Isabel?
Yeah, no problem. So this is the one with regards to the internal audit plan.
Yes.
So it's a bit about the wording, the consultation and engagement. So up until now, you have received the internal audit plan for approval, which you have received for today. This year we did it slightly differently, and we sought views prior to that, and hopefully you will all confirm that you have already received some information on the plan and what we proposed for the plan. We also then discussed it at the last pre-agenda meeting, based on the fact you already had it, you'd already had a chance to come up with any questions, queries, and just it's more about that overall engagement. There weren't really any changes as part of that process, and that is why you have the internal audit plan that you have today. That process also happened with chief officers at CMT, and there was a bit of discussion around what was in the plan and why it was in the plan, and just really trying to get into the bones of that. Going forward, this is always a really hectic time of year, trying to do the annual planning work to make up all the annual plans for each of the internal audit programmes, but also then all the annual assurance work that takes us into our next committee, which is where we provide our annual assurance opinion for the year. So when all of that culminates, it is pretty hectic. And going forward next year, it may be that we try and have more of a face-to-face earlier in the process to try and engage maybe more so in the face-to-face environment, because maybe there would be more dialogue at that point. There's also a question around sending the plan out wider than this committee, and again, that's something that we can seek views on. So in summary, we did engage with this committee. The proposals did go out in advance. We everyone seemed relatively happy. There weren't any changes to the plan. That also happened with chief officers, and that's the plan that you have in front of you today, which is later in the agenda. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Isabel, I wonder if we were to go through with this recommendation, which I know we're obliged to do, how much of a delay in the progress of getting the plan implemented would that be? Seeking out more, widening up the opinion and waiting for those views to come back?
Yeah, it certainly would take more time in the process, but it's worthwhile time. We want engagement with our plan. We want the buy-in to the plan. You know, also when it comes to this point for the approval of the plan, that everyone is already very well aware of what's in there, why it's in there. I think the onus is on us as an internal audit team to try and bring that process earlier in the year so that we give ourselves more time. And that's not going to be easy, but in part we're trying to look ahead and engage earlier. Also, on the previous question around the annual governance statement, we're trying to start that process earlier because we're putting in these extra safeguarding measures. We're going to have extra meetings. We're going to be engaging further more. It's about being more transparent around what we do. Again, that will need to be earlier. So I think the onus is on me, basically, to try and timetable those things in earlier to take some of the pressure off at the other end. At this point, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that, but I'm definitely going to attempt to do that next year, because it's the only way that we're going to get that engagement to happen.
Thanks, Isabel. Like I say, my only concern is the resourcing. Does anyone else have any further questions to ask? Councillor Meikle-John.
Convener, I just wanted to just ask, of the 11 standards which the council fully conforms to, have we always conformed to those standards? Has our position improved since the last assessment? You know, just what's the change? I think that would be useful to know, just about how the council's progressing.
Isabel?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because the assessment that happened 5 years ago was undertaken by the Scottish Prison Service. That was EQA1. That 5-year period was called EQA1. The period we've just been assessed on this report was EQA2, and I think you know where I'm going. The next 5-year period will be EQA3. So, and because EQA3 is now the global internal audit standards, that assessment will change, but it also changed at EQA2 from EQA1 in terms of format and what was looked at. So we're not able to compare between the two reports. They classed even the conformance differently within that. The report that was completed by the Scottish Prison Service in 2018 was, it stated we were broadly compliant with the public sector's internal audit standards, which is obviously different from the generally conforms, fully conforms that we have in this AQA assessment period. It still gave us a number of recommendations, and those recommendations, as far as I remember, were reported back to committee as they were actioned. They included things like recommendations grading was one of the recommendations from that audit, and so we introduced that one. So that's why our recommendations are now graded from grade 1 to grade 3 to provide the information around how quickly we think they need to be done or what the risks are around them, and it builds up that picture on the assurance opinion. So that was one of the recommendations. There were recommendations around updating our manual, things like that. But they've all been really superseded now because of the new assessment. And to give you some comfort, though that assessment, the report was looked at by the current assessor, the Fife Council assessor. So they looked at the previous report and what the recommendations were and how we had taken those forward. So there is some assurance there that it wasn't forgotten about and that progress was made at that time. It's just now that we've moved on and these new recommendations are what we'll be working to achieve and to implement.
Thank you, Isabel. Do we have any further questions? No? Then can I ask, are we happy to agree and note the report? Thank you. Okay, over to you again, Isabel, for item 6.
Yes, thanks, Convener. The second report from Internal Audit today seeks approval for the new internal audit strategy and an updated internal audit charter. Section 3 outlines the requirements as part of the Global Internal Audit Standards, and paragraphs 4.1 to 4.4 provide the detail on the preparation of an internal audit strategy as part of those standards. The strategy can be found at Appendix 1. At paragraphs 4.5 to 4.7, I've set out the requirements in relation to the Internal Audit Charter. It can be found at Appendix 2. Both documents have already been shared with the corporate management team and also Audit Committee members to ensure that they reflect their understanding and expectations of the internal audit function. Only minor amendments were made as a result. In conclusion, both of the documents have been developed in line with the Global Internal Audit Standards, and the new Internal Audit Strategy sets out the vision, objectives and supporting initiatives for the Council's internal audit function for the period 2026 to 2029. And the Internal Audit Charter sets out the role, authority and responsibilities of the internal audit team. It provides a high-level framework within which the team operates. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener. Page 56 indicates that it will be reviewed in May 29 or earlier if there are changes to the Council's priorities or emerging risks, statutory or regulatory updates, or any other matters identified that need to be addressed. Is it likely that the audit plan, the strategy will be reviewed earlier, and what would be the triggers for that review? What would be the change in circumstances that would indicate that it needed to be reviewed?
Yeah, thank you. So if there were a new council plan, for example, and there was a change to the council priorities, so that may happen. The council plan is getting updated, so there may be changes there. So that would be one of the things that we would have to review and amend appropriately. If there were any changes to legislation or guidance that we felt were appropriate, we would look at it then. So at this point, we are expecting to have to update it next year. That's not a problem because the Internal Audit Charter is going to be reviewed annually anyway, so it will be done at the same time, and it won't really add much to our workload to do that, and it will take into account all of those potential changes. So we're aware of that and anticipating that it probably will change next year, and that we'll just keep that under review year on year when we're looking at the charter and updating that anyway. It's just the strategy is for that longer period of time, so if we don't need to make any changes to it, then we obviously wouldn't, because it's forward looking.
Thank you, Isabel. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you. Also in relation to Appendix 1, I'm a bit concerned about the level of resources. There's reference to the team providing audit services, but for all of Falkirk Council services, for the Falkirk Integration Joint Board, for the Falkirk Pension Fund, for as well as Stirling and Clackmannan and the Central Scotland Valuation Board. Are you confident that your team is able to manage all that work within the existing resources, or is there any scope for additional resources on a more permanent basis?
Amanda.
Thank you. Oh, right, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I was maybe just going to come in first just to clarify, we don't provide services to Stirling Council.
Sorry.
And Clackmannanshire Council have their own member of staff, and they're also in the process of trying to recruit a member of staff. Now, that recruitment hasn't been successful. These posts are very difficult to recruit to. So I suppose just to clarify that it's not just the team in Falkirk that are delivering that, albeit they do have a really wide range of organisations that they support. I suppose for me, the sort of tipping point, if you like, from my perspective, is if we get to a point where, for whatever reason, if it's for a lack of resources, Isabel's saying to me, I won't be able to do enough work to provide that assurance, that annual assurance piece. Like, we won't be able to cover enough scope. And so for me, that would be a sort of significant trigger point. I think we have identified, and I think it's in one of the documents, that we've delivered less than we anticipated, but in part because of the challenges around recruitment on Clackmannanshire side, and in part because of absence within the team. And we have been looking at how else we can address that. So the report references that we've gone out to other local authorities to see where they could come in and support us. And Isabel and I have also had some conversations about whether there would be scope to look at some temporary resource. Again, the challenge is finding that resource. I think if we get to a point where, I suppose we've got the collaboration work, and I don't want to preempt what comes out of the collaboration work, and that is with Stirling and Clackmannanshire Council. So we've had the sort of initial scoping document for that work agreed at the Transformation Through Collaboration Board. We're now looking at how we take that forward. We've been gathering information, getting our baseline information for that pulled together. So that is a project that we want to move forward at pace. And part of that is certainly because of the issues around resources, particularly on the Clackmannanshire side, where they're struggling to recruit. So I think through that work, we will have to do a much fuller and broader assessment of the resource that would be required to deliver a service in a more collaborative way. What's the kind of the absolute resource that we need? So I suppose I don't really want to preempt what comes out of that review. But I think at this stage, Isabel is telling us that there's been sufficient work done that she can provide that assurance. We are looking at alternatives to some of the resource pressures that have come up this year, and we are taking forward the transformation through collaboration work. So I suppose there's quite a few strands there that we are moving forward. I think, you know, none of our support teams would not back additional resource if we could find it, and if we could find the budget to pay for it. And we know that is a challenge, and that we are, we're looking at a significant financial gap in 27-28. So I think we just really need to make sure that we're going through a really thorough process to assess where the biggest need is and how we address that as a council. Thanks. Isabel may want to come in.
Thank you, Amanda. Isabel?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would point out is that over the last couple of years anyway, we've been unable to complete our internal audit plan. for Falkirk, and actually for Clackmannanshire Council. So it has meant that we have had to defer audits into the next year. We could choose not to add those deferred audits. We could choose to remove them, say we've not been able to do them, and we have other items that we believe are more needing reviewed. But we tried to commit to, if they've been in that year's plan, that we would, and they were warranted to be there, that we would try and undertake them as quickly as possible in the new year. But if we continue to have deferred audits because we cannot get through our programme of work, we're always on the back foot going into the new year. And that's kind of the cycle that we're in. Amanda's completely right. The risk to the council is if we can't provide that opinion because we haven't done enough work or the broad range of work that we need to provide that overall opinion every year. And so far, there's not been an issue with that. We do provide enough work. It's more the day-to-day capacity issues that are the issue, and the fact that we are in that cycle just now where we just cannot get our programmes completed. Any hiccup in a small team, even with one extra auditor at Clackmannanshire Council, it still is. We are a very small team with a broad range on varied programme of work over 5-6 different organisations. If there's any hiccup in there, and that could be the request for an additional piece of work, it could be an absence in the team, it could be someone leaving, it could be a new member of staff starting. Any hiccup in there is quite significant for us because we don't have that extra capacity to immediately absorb that. And there's definitely things that need to move or be removed or considered to make space for that or to consider that. And as Amanda says, we're not unlike any other team that's facing the same similar issues. And the broader point is that we can still, at this point, provide our opinion every year. It's just the getting there that's more the issue.
Thank you for both those answers, but I think it still kind of begs the question, because we have been addressing the issue of the adequacy of the resources that you have over the last 2 or 3 years. It has come up on numerous occasions, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of, I get that there is temporary resources being brought in, but if you're constantly rolling over work from one year into the next, a temporary resource may enable you to get over an immediate hurdle, but how is it going to resolve the underlying structural problem, which would appear to be that there is a need for more resources? And I absolutely take the issue about, we know how difficult the financial situation is, but audit is a really important function.
Thank you, Councillor. Amanda first, sorry.
Okay.
I suppose I don't know if I agree that I think there's an underlying structural issue in resource. I think there's been, as Isabel said, and it happens in every team, there's pressures because of people leaving, new people coming in, people being trained. There's issues because of sickness, things like that add pressures to teams, and we all have to, within our teams, flex to be able to manage that. And that will mean that some things have to be pulled back and some things we can't do to the extent that we wanted to. I also think, as Isabel said, and she says it in her papers as well, there is a need for the plan to be flexible because something can come up which needs to be inserted into the plan. That might mean that we prioritise and say, well, we have to take something out, and that could be one of the deferred audits that Isabel is referring to. So that's a choice around priorities and risks and what we think is more important to tackle at any given time. And then I think the other point that Isabel's made is the complexity of some of the audits. So if everything's going really well and all our audits are substantial assurance, they're much easier audits to get over the line, to get agreement, to get the reports out. Where we start facing and coming across audits where it's limited assurance or no assurance, those take a lot more time than potentially ends up in the plan. And that, again, that goes back to that need to have flexibility within the plan. I think I'm not saying that I would completely rule out the idea that more resources required. And as I said, I think I'm hoping that the transformation through collaboration work, we will set a baseline, we'll understand what other local authorities have. We've sent out information, done an information sort of gathering piece of work to try and understand what is in place, what are those kind of baselines we could be comparing ourselves to understand if there is, if we are lower than others and things like that. So that review may well throw up some challenges for us, and then we may well be coming back to say, actually, we do think there's a resource issue that we need to address. The challenge will be about how we identify the budget to do that, and also whether, I suppose, whether that's where we want to focus the resource, because there's always choices, and where's the priority for putting the resource. And it could be on the audit side, it could be on the risk side, it could be on the fraud side, wherever we might look. So I don't feel that at this point, given the audit can give us the assurances every year, given that there is a large number of really thorough, high quality pieces of work coming in front of committee regularly. And I suppose the other thing I would maybe flag is things like that protracted period with the EQA taking a long time, things like the revised audit charter and the new code of practice, and all these things, they take up a lot of time, which isn't productive in terms of generating an audit report. They're all sort of happening in the background, and you can have peaks and troughs with that as well. So I think I suppose go back to my earlier point. We are reviewing the area. We're trying to be quite objective about it. We're looking at the TTC work, but I'm comfortable at the moment that Isabel's team, as I say, are continuing to provide really high quality pieces of work that are really thorough, and they're still continuing to be able to provide us with those assurance statements.
Okay,
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you. I should have clarified, by the way, I apologise if I suggested that we were doing work for Stirling Council. It was the Stirling and Clack Manager, IJB, that I was meaning to refer to. And I'm happy to know that there's ongoing review and keeping an eye on how things are done, but it just, and I don't for a moment want to suggest that our internal audit team are not providing quality work. We get a lot of very good quality audit reports at this committee, so don't want it to be suggested that it's otherwise. Just one final question is, you mentioned prioritisation. Is there a prioritisation for Falkirk Council work as opposed to some of these other organisations, or are they all equally vying for the resources available?
Isabel?
Yeah, we're as equally committed to all organisations that we perform the work for. The issues are around resourcing those and what needs to be done when. So as you're aware, we have different plans for each of the different organisations, and we agree with those organisations what that work will look like. It's just a matter of fitting it all in. So we have the person at Clip Manager who works full time on Clip Manager work. We provide another full-time resource for Clip Manager. So it's factoring that in and then working out who is available to do the work, and when some of that's needed. Some of our audit work is required at various quite definitive periods of time of the year, so we have to try and schedule them in to make sure they're done in time. So we have to look at all of that and map it, and myself and the senior internal auditor discuss. We have weekly meetings and we go through the internal audit plan on at least a monthly basis, reassessing, discussing where things are at, how long they've got to go, what can be worked on next. And it's obviously everything, it's all of these plans, and we go between them trying to slot things in. Also, what the service are looking for, what actually is a good point for them, because it is intensive. It is a time away from their day job, and that it can be a stressful period when we're looking for, more often than not, quite a lot of evidence. We're interviewing people, we're looking for a lot of information back. And another thing that's important for me when I look at it and we go through this process is I need to ensure that the auditor who is going to be on that piece of work, that there's enough development in there for them. So, because for example, we could year on year give the same pieces of work. For example, we do the pensions board work. So every year we do those audits. Some of that is transactional testing. We could year on year have the same auditor doing all of that pensions work, but that's for continuity purposes, that's no use. It's not any use for the person who's doing it year on year, and we want to develop other people within our team. So we try to, it's not like a rota, but we will try and share that work out and move it around year on year so that people are getting different audits to do, different areas of work to do, different lengths of audits, different complexities. But again, it's very hard because it's a small team to be able to do that and juggle all of these commitments and rota. It's almost like a rota of a schedule to try and make sure that we're doing all of that coverage. So Falkirk is our priority. We are committed to the Falkirk plan, but we are equally committed to every other plan that we do because we want to undertake them. When we put these plans up for approval, we go into these plans with the intention that we're completing it, and that all of these audit reviews are of value. So we want them to be done to the best of our ability. So we're equally committed. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, convener.
Amanda?
Oh.
Yeah, I suppose just to add to that we're obliged to do things like the IGB audits, and we can't. Those aren't really things that we can sort of opt out of doing, or valuation joint board and things like that. So we have seen some changes in the last sort of year or so. So 25-26, we didn't undertake the Strathcarron hospice work. That was the first time that we hadn't done that for some time, and part of that was because we were having those discussions with Strathcarron Hospice about the resource that was going to be required for that work, and then looking at what they needed and things. I suppose the other thing I would just flag is when part of the reason that Client Manager Council are going out for that senior accountant is because we have flagged concerns about the level of resource at a senior level that's required to support Client Management. So we are actively sort of taking those steps to put our views forward. Now, Client Manager, like every other council, is under a lot of financial pressure, but they have committed to putting that resource in. And we're anticipating that would have a positive impact for Falkirk. So we are looking at where we can see pressures and challenges and trying to work with our partners to see how we best address those. Just something
Okay.
bad.
Thank you, convener.
Thank you. Councillor Patrick? You're on mute, Councillor Patrick.
Apologies. You mentioned the 5 strategic objectives that have been outlined in the internal audit strategy with committed actions and outcomes. Can you just give us some sort of information about how they're going to be implemented and an idea about timescales?
Isabel.
Yeah, to be honest, I should probably have put timescales in there when I wrote the strategy. That was an oversight. My intention is, obviously we've already discussed the external quality assessment and the recommendations from there. So we have those. We also have the global internal audit standards. And if you remember, we did some gap analysis and we brought an improvement and plan of actions of what we would look to do. So this is another, all of that in my view will come together. So the intent is to bring a progress update later this year, hopefully one of our end of year committees, to try to bring all of those together and give you an update on where we are with all of those. But I really should have put in timescales, so apologies for that. The point about how are we going to do it, some of them are actions that are just going to happen anyway, they're just ongoing. Others we will have to do specific things. Some of them are linked to recommendations that have been made as part of the EQA, for example. So the work plan part is in both those areas, hence why if we bring them all together, we'll hopefully have a better flow of what's required. So some of them are underway, some of them will take longer, some of them are just ongoing actions. But if I bring that to you, hopefully I can have it in a format that brings all of those together and allows you to see what we've been able to achieve. They certainly will not be forgotten about, because there are all these different aspects that we're having to do anyway, so they will naturally move forward through the remainder of this year.
Thanks, Isabel. That's useful information. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I have one question. The global internal audit standards, part of our conformity with it is the KPIs we have to meet. Are we able to consistently meet these with our current resources?
So as part of our annual assurance work, we provide an annual assurance report that will come to the next meeting in June. That work is already underway, and part of that is pulling together all the information for these KPIs. So I'm not at the point of being able to tell you or report what those KPIs are for 25-26 in terms of us being able to having achieved them or not, but that will come to the June committee. But what I can say is that last year we failed to meet one of the performance indicators, and that was the 85% of reports within 3 weeks at draft report stage. We just missed that one. I think the target is 85%, and I think we literally just missed it. And the reasons for that last year were that we had been requested to do 2 pieces of additional work, and we tried to achieve that on top of everything else that we were doing. We didn't remove other work to do that, so it gave us a lot of different delays, different issues with it, but we had those 2 reviews. And then the other point was that we had some issues over on the Clamanagher Council side, and we needed to provide more resource there. So again, if we're taking resource from Falkirk and we're moving it to Clamanagher, then we're not doing the same work in Falkirk. So we were impacted last year with that KPI. So it was something like 80 odd percent, but it was certainly under the 85%. And I'll be able to report back in June on this year's.
Thank you, Isabel. Moving to the more internal audit charter itself, Councillor Forrest.
Thanks very much, Isabel, for everything so far. Regarding the internal audit charter, on page 52, the most recent internal audit charter was approved in October 2024, but the covering report states that the internal audit charter will be reviewed on an annual basis for consideration and approval from the Audit Committee. Why was it not reviewed by the committee in 2025?
Yeah, I can see why you would ask that, and probably I should have added that. The charter up until this point has been reviewed every 2 years. It's not been annually, but when we revised the charter and it became such a bigger document with more likelihood of things maybe changing or needing updated, we felt that an annual review rather than 2 yearly would be better. So that's why it wasn't reviewed in 2025.
That's great, thank you. Just a wee add-on, the internal audit charter has been expanded to conform with the new GIAS requirements. What are the differences between the demands of the new charter as opposed to the older ones?
The charter has become a meatier document. The standards ask for a lot more information. That has culminated in more sections within the new charter. So there's an addition of a section on the internal audit purpose. There's an internal audit mandate section, which you'll obviously see in the appendix. There's a lot of additional information around responsibilities and what those responsibilities are, what the reporting arrangements are, so and how we undertake our work. So I suppose there's not a lot of huge significant changes. It's just a lot more information around those and how they're set out, and basically just giving you a lot more data around that. But I'd say those off the top of my head are the main changes. It's just the addition of sections, including purpose, mandate, responsibilities, reporting arrangements, even the how we're going to review is an addition. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
Thanks. So for me to read, more labour intensive.
For sure.
Thank you for that, Isabel.
Thank you, Isabel. Does anyone else have any other questions? I have one for either Amanda or Kenneth. Auditors by nature have to be independent and objective. Can I ask how, as CEO and head of finance, are you going to ensure this is the case going forward?
I maybe start. So I think, obviously Isabel reports to myself. However, we've recognised and we've documented Isabel's need to be independent and to be able to put her views forward. And so, for example, Isabel's reports will come to me to read, and I may suggest some changes or ask where there's some confusion, but I'll never suggest a change to any opinion that she's providing or any finding. It's more sort of if I think maybe there's some clarity needed or something like that. So when I'm reviewing those reports, I'm very mindful of Isabel's position, and I say that as an ex-auditor as well. I'm very mindful of Isabel's position and her role. Also, Isabel has direct access to all of the directors, so she meets regularly with directors. That doesn't have to come through me. She has access to the chief executive if she wants to discuss anything with him directly. And she also obviously has full access to yourselves as Audit Committee. So there's a number of ways where Isabel can directly provide her views without having to go through either myself or a director or Kenneth. So Isabel, and I would hope and expect that Isabel understands that she has that full access to yourselves and to the Chief Exec as required. And as I say, we have sort of formalised within these documents Isabel's role and her need for independence and objectivity. I'm not aware of any difficulties or challenges that have been raised in terms of any. I think that actually it may be in the assurance report actually that Isabel's, there's not any suggestion of any fettering of any audit activities. And I would like to think that if anything like that did occur, Isabel would know that she could bring it to CMT for discussion and for resolution quickly. Thanks.
Thank you, Amanda. Kenneth?
Thank you, Convener. I mean, there's not a lot to add to that. Amanda's answer is really comprehensive. And I think in Falkirk, we hugely value our internal audit resource, the strength of the team, the work they do, the independence they bring, their preparedness to challenge us when we need to be challenged. I think we hold that independence and Isabel's independent role as being hugely important. So Amanda's talked about the various ways in which Isabel, if she has concerns, can come to myself as Chief Executive, yourselves as members of the Audit Committee. I think, and it's not for me to put words into Isabel's mouth. I think that she uses that judiciously, but she absolutely knows that if there's an issue in the organisation where she has a concern, she can come to me, she can come to Amanda, she can come to you as an Audit Committee. And I think it's that's an incredibly important thing. It's something that I think we all value, we need to value, and we need to maintain for the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more final questions regarding this report? No? Are we happy to note and agree this report then? Thank you very much. And sorry, Isabel, but it's back to you again for the next one. Isabel, you're on mute.
Yeah, I realise. Thank you. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on where we are with completion of the 25-26 internal audit plan. Paragraphs 4.1 and 4.2 provide an update on the completion of the internal audit plan. A summary of progress is at Appendix 1. The scope and the findings arising since the last committee in February in relation to the finalised review of medication within schools is set out at Appendix 2. Paragraphs 4.3 to 4.5 specifically highlight some delays we've faced completing the internal audit plan and also provide details regarding action taken to increase capacity. I'd also like to draw members' attention to paragraph 4.6, which relates to actions taken on duplicate payments. I'd ask members to note the recommendations and the conclusions, that is, the progress with the finalisation of the 25-26 internal audit plan and the carry forward of 4 audits into the 26-27 internal audit plan. The work undertaken in 25-26 will contribute to the provision of a balanced and evidence-based year-end opinion. Members should also note the action taken regarding the continuous auditing, which is in relation to the duplicate payments. Thank you. Happy to try and answer any questions.
Thank you, Isabel. I'm happy to note the progress made in delivering the plan, but I've also made a note that the 4 was carried over and the external auditors have noted risks associated with available resource. Just as a note, again, you've already gone into the hopeful recruitment of a new auditor in Clackmannan. Just again, I reiterate, thank you for all your hard work in that. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Convener. Just first question, I wonder if you could say a bit more about the pupil equity funding arrangement report. It's supposed to be at the draft report stage. Is there any indication when that will be coming in full to the Audit Committee? I don't know whether that's for Isabel or for our education colleagues.
Isabel?
Yeah, it's for me. Thank you. So the Pupil Equity Fund report is at draft report stage. The report has gone to the service. They have clarified the information within the report. They have provided some more evidence, and we are at the stage of looking through that additional evidence to check if it makes any changes to the information in the report that's there already. The auditor who is working on that is currently on leave, so as soon as they're back, that is a priority for them to look at that report again. It's actually currently sitting with the senior internal auditor, and so we will make any changes that we deem are relevant, and anything that we don't think changes anything to what we have found will not be changed, and we will speak through those changes or possible not changes with the service so that we can then issue a final report. So I should be able to provide you an update with where that is at the next committee at the end of June.
Thank you, convener.
Okay. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thanks, convener. Page 82, the Madison Primary School. The phase 2 report is still in progress. Can you give an update on the expected timeline of this assignment and give you an indication of where it is just now and how long it's taking to get there, and given an expected timeline of when that will actually come forward?
Yes, of course. The Madison report, if you remember, was a phase 2 report. We've already brought a Madison report last year, which was quite a lengthy report to undertake, and it was directed a lot around to the finances and the overspend around the Madison extension. This report, or this review rather, is looking at other aspects of that, and the services. We've had to speak to a lot of people within the services. We have gathered significant amounts of data. Even the interviews that have been undertaken have been lengthy. It's probably one of, if not the biggest audits we have undertaken in a number of years, if not ever. And some of our audits have been lengthy. It's even at one point of this review, I chose to assign another auditor to help to go through the interviews and the drafting of so much of the information. We are almost at the draft report stage, but you will appreciate that, the scale. It's quite a mammoth task to go through and to try and pull all that together. We're in the process of going back and forward with the service to try and get as much of the evidence as possible, but some of that information just isn't available anymore, and so the service are doing their utmost to try and find that and to give us whatever they will build that picture better. So it has taken months and months of work so far, I'm not going to deny that, and to get it to a final position is still probably going to take a number of months, but only because we are trying to build the most accurate picture as possible before it comes in front of this committee, that all the information that we have in there, that any of the findings and any of the recommendations that we make, we're sure are accurate, and no stone has been left unturned to get to that. So again, I can try and give you an update at the next committee in June to see if we're any nearer to that draft report being available. At that point, it will then go through a process, and I think it's a point Amanda actually made earlier, that reports are taking longer to go through, and especially when they are of the scale that they are, and they're looking at such complex, sensitive areas such as this one, there is a lot to go through, and there is a lot the service need that time. And sometimes audit can be guilty of not giving or thinking that the service won't need as much time, that these things aren't going to come as a surprise, and they shouldn't come as a surprise. But what the service may want to do at that point is take time to process what's in there and also look for the evidence that we maybe need. And sometimes that just isn't straightforward. So I will endeavour to give you another update in June as to how much nearer the Maddiston report is.
Do we anticipate that it will come to committee before the end of the calendar year?
I would definitely hope so.
Okay, thank you. Final question I have is in relation to the 4 assignments that have not yet been started. Do we have anticipated timescales for those to start?
One of them has actually already started. The Whole Family Wellbeing Fund was one of the deferred audits. That work has been started because, well, the service, my service, were very supportive to agree to providing some temporary extra resource, which is being provided by Glasgow City Council. They are currently undertaking that review, so that which is a great help to us at this point, because we are still trying to finish what remains of 25-26. But Glasgow City Council have come in and have said that they've undertaken that audit within their own local authority, so they have some expertise there. So they were comfortable to take that audit on. So that one has already started. We will endeavour, as I said earlier, we try to make our deferred audits a priority, but that hasn't changed. So we endeavour to do that. But again, like we've said already through all morning, basically the flex that has to be there in case other things happen, other things come in, but we are committed to trying to do them. And you'll see when we go into the next report, the plan, it's been drafted slightly differently. So it's a first 6 months and the last 6 months. So most of that deferred work is in there to try and get that over the line.
Okay, thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? And we'll move on to Appendix 2 of the report regarding medication in schools. I'm a little concerned yet again. As you know, I'm a lead compliance auditor myself. All the recommendations have been given the same completion date. How achievable is that? Joe?
Thank you, Convener. I suppose before addressing your question directly, I'd like to set out our overall position related to this audit. I think I just want to reiterate what the Chief Executive said during the discussion of the previous agenda item. We welcome the level of scrutiny provided through audit. It plays an important role in supporting our ongoing improvement journey. We value the audit process as a constructive means of identifying areas for development and strengthening practice across our service. It provides a robust mechanism for assurance, transparency and continuous improvement. We recognise that the audit identified a number of areas where practice required to be strengthened, and we have taken these findings seriously in progressing the necessary improvements. I suppose to more directly answer your question, we can confirm to members that all actions arising from the audit have now been completed. In addition, we have implemented enhanced internal checks and assurance measures to strengthen oversight, promote consistency and reduce the likelihood of reoccurrence.
Thank you, Jill. As I do with all of our reports, if they've all been completed, could it be possible to provide for the next meeting? It's just a complete template listing the recommendations and the date they were completed. It just keeps us. And it's something in the audit world that's templated that Isabel's very well aware of, and it's useful for both Isabel and this committee. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener. Just building on that, and thanks, Jill. You've already can answered part of what I was looking for. You've already indicated that our existing guidance didn't align with national guidance, and therefore it needed to be updated and better oversight. But it's about how did we get into this position in the first place? Because we did have a protocol in place, and did we have a lack of oversight? Was there a confusion about responsibilities? And how will we make sure that we don't end up in this position again, and that we do comply with national guidance? Because there's been a lot of concerns around this, and I'm sure others are going to draw out some of that as we go on.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Convener. Just before I pass over to my colleague, just around some of the specifics, I think just to reiterate that we have now developed revised guidance, which has been developed and issued to all establishments. So that's now going out to everybody. It aligns with the national standards, sets out clear procedures for managing medication errors, and includes and introduces explicit requirements for oversight and control. These changes directly address the identified gaps, strengthens consistency and support compliance, and reduce the risks of reducing risks associated with medication management, including safeguarding concerns. We've also, which Kenny will explain to you as well, we've got implementation being monitored through strengthened quality assurance and oversight processes as well. So if you don't mind as well to answer some of the more specifics, I'm going to pass over to Kenny. Thank you. Thanks, Kenny.
Go ahead, Kenny.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. Firstly, if you don't mind, I'd like to acknowledge the support that I receive and the service receives from our internal audit team. On a personal level, they've advised me out with audits on good practice and so on and so forth, and we really value their input. And as Jill says, the audit of this particular procedure, whilst somewhat painful in terms of the actions that require to be taken, is extremely helpful and continues our improvement journey together. The actual guidance, as Jill says, has been in place since not long after the millennium. It had worked well. The procedure was still in place at the time of the audit. And what had happened is there'd been a conflict between the procedure we had in place and the procedure we were wishing to implement moving forward. Something called the pandemic happened in between the Scottish guidance coming out and where we are now. Not an excuse by any manner of means. However, I need to hold my hands up and say as a service that we welcome the audit findings and the actions have been taken now to implement the controls moving forward. Like any improvement journey, probably my bit, and as the accountable person moving forward, as has been determined by the service, the easy bit to an extent is writing the guidance. The hard bit for us as a service and the council is to make sure it actually gets implemented and happens. So we have a robust arrangement being put in place, both in terms of the forms that are used, the processes, and our oversight of the procedure and the allocation of our limited resources, but prioritised to support this, to ensure that those guidance are implemented and that head teachers and heads of centre are supported in implementing that guidance. Starting on the requirement by before the end of June to return what we call a Med 13 form, which just confirms how the guidance had been received by each establishment and how it's been implemented. And again, with any improvement journey, Convener, we are recognising as we move forward through that journey there will continue to be improvements, and we'll continue to liaise with our colleagues in audit on how we're getting on with and making those improvements happen through time. But we have delivered our 34 management actions that stem from the 11 recommendations that came from audit, and we did it at pace for obvious reasons.
Okay, thank you, Convener. Just as a follow-up, can I ask, has there been an updated training regime for staff implemented in relation to the new guidance?
I'm pleased to see that we've already started our training arrangements with One, the comprehensive guidance, which is written in an easy read and a focused form, so that it's very procedural, Councillor. What I've tried to do and what I have done taking this forward is break down the complexities of healthcare needs in schools and focus on a process. So that process is the source of the, in essence, the improvement agenda that we require to make sure there's a consistency of process application, paperwork and oversight to ensure that's being applied. We have delivered that through the guidance that we have written and delivered to schools. However, moving forward, implementing that guidance at the very first stage, we've offered 3 drop-in sessions, which will extend it to 4 for any colleagues in education who've read the guidance and have any questions. I have an officer who's following up with site visits to discuss the best practice across our schools. I've got one such site visit taking place to a school called Hall Glen, and they will bring back what they see as good and reflect that in the procedures moving forward, and we'll update our guidance. So our guidance is written in what I've referred to with colleagues as a dynamic document, sometimes called a living document. It can be updated, best practice shared, and move forward the same way we would with our school improvement agenda. In terms of training moving forward, we've also introduced a mandatory requirement for training and reinforced that. Was in the original guidance, but we've simply reinforced it in this guidance, and we have a governance framework around our paperwork that requires that competency and that training to be evidenced before any medication is administered to any child. And I personally will be making sure that that is supported throughout the rollout of this process.
Thank you for that. My final question, and I notice that Marie's maybe dropped off the call, is I just wondered if there are any other establishments out with education that are subject to this guidance and only currently follow council guidance. If it's broader than that, thinking around our active schools, our summer programmes and various other third sector organisations, etc.
Thank you, Kenny.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, indeed, there will be other examples of medication administration across council services. For example, home care may be one that our health and social care partnerships would wish to comment on. What I will be doing personally, again, is making sure that the guidance has been developed for education and indeed is embedded in early years through the care inspectorate. Will similarly be discussed and any issues picked up within the council through our colleagues in the Health and Social Care Partnership. As regards sport and leisure, I work next to these teams, so I'll just reach out to them and just make sure that we've all got an awareness this procedure is in place. A simple thing that is evidence that we're thinking beyond the emails is that we're going to install posters in schools with QR codes just to reinforce the procedures. It's a lesson I learnt from my audit colleagues on another matter. But, you know, there's more to this than just simply writing the policy. We have to reach out and we need to try hard to make sure that these procedures are embedded and people are supported taking them forward. There's no risk we take more serious. So, Marie's convener. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny. Marie?
Yeah, I suppose it was just to say that Caroline Doherty, our now interim chief officer, updated our medications policy, and that came to the IJBE back in September 2024. So that has been updated recently and implemented. So I can certainly take a wee action just to make sure that, you know, if there's any others and around our third sector as well, that would be monitored through our contract monitoring as well. Councillor Miko John. So I have reasonable assurance that, you know, that's all ongoing and that medication policy will be followed by our staff as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Convener.
Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Convener. I'm really pleased to have the reassurance that that the guidance has been updated and that the recording is being improved. But I think we need to look at, and will all staff who are administering medication have to sign something to say, yes, I have read and understand the guidance, because just putting it out is not enough. There's a very real need to get that reassurance that there is a follow through.
Kenny.
Thank you again, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, indeed there will be. So any administration of medication will be front-ended with appropriate training delivered by a health professional or delivered by one of our other employees with the permission of the health professional. At the end of that training, the employee will be required under the procedures that we've implemented to confirm that they believe they are competent to deliver that, administer that medication. And we will also be checking as a requirement within that process that the head of establishment, head of centre is satisfied that the individual has received the appropriate training and is competent to deliver what we would regard as, in very simplistic terms, locus parentis type situations where you're administering a prescribed medication rather than a medical intervention. So yes, we absolutely will require and will evidence that staff have received training and believe themselves to be competent, and that also is a requirement of our public liability insurance and so on and so forth, that we follow that training by the letter.
Jill, thanks, Kenny.
Thank you, Convener. Just to add to that as well, Kenny's referred to it previously, but just to reiterate again, we've introduced a new form, a Med 13 form, which asks heads of establishment to confirm that the information has been disseminated within the school, all training requirements have been met, and that they can assure compliance within their own establishments. That then allows us to then get assurances per establishment that these things are being locally followed or followed up. We've also introduced, in a slightly strengthened approach, an opportunity to quality assure a random sample of schools every year. So once we've completed all the training and we've introduced the guidance, as a governance process within the centre, we will be randomly sampling schools just to continue that quality assurance journey, to provide our self-assurances as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it's reassuring to know that there's kind of thorough training being put in place, but things change over time and staff change over time. And so what arrangements will be in place for refresher training? How frequently will there be refresher training available?
Kenny.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. In line with the audit recommendations, the service has introduced quarterly review of all medication arrangements in school. Our assurance processes are based around ensuring that training is kept up to date. Now, the previous procedures, staff administering medication would be receiving training. The issue that we were picking up was the governance around the documentation to prove that those staff had been trained and when they were trained, for example. So the processes we've implemented and their processes will address those concerns. We have introduced quarterly reviews where there is any requirement to refresher training. It's captured in the individual health plan that's associated with the child, the young person, and if there's any requirement to change a dosage, change a prescription, so on and so forth, then there'll be triggers built in within the process to undertake that review. Mostly, I'm pleased to say that the administration arrangements are stable, and once you're trained, we need to make sure that your training is reviewed to keep up to date with current practice. So we will be introducing a similar concept as they have in the early learning centres, where there is more regular review of the medication arrangements and complying with that enhanced standard. The procedures that we're bringing in most circumstances exceed the requirements set out in the Scottish Government guidance now, but we can still improve them further, and that would be our intention.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have a quick question, Kenny. If you get a new pupil in with different requirements, because I know my granddaughter had to go through the process when she moved from primary to high, how is your staff informed, and if need be, specific training for that medication?
Okay, thank you. Well, every child's treated as an individual, so the individual prescription arrangements for that child would be detailed in the Med 1 and the Med 2 forms. Sorry to go procedural, but these would be agreed with the parents before any medication is administered. We wouldn't presume that the medication of the administration of, say, let's just say paracetamol to child A is the same as the prescription and the arrangements for child B. So for each child, there would be an individual assessment of what the administration arrangements are. That would be documented in the Med 1 and the Med 2 consent forms for the parents, and there would be a named officer, and it would only be those named officers who could prescribe that administration moving forward. So in a school X, it would be Kenny McNeil and Jill Pringle, and we would need to make sure we had arrangements in place that we were there to prescribe that medication to that child.
Thank you, Kenny. Councillor Patrick.
Yes, thank you, convener. I was interested in the section about the emergency stock analgesics, and presumably we're meaning what we have in our own cabinets, at bathroom cabinets at home, painkillers such as paracetamol or whatever. I understand that these were being dispensed to children, but that the agreement is, the guidelines are that we can only give a child medication which has actually been prescribed to them. I know we always seem it kind of common just to take something if we felt we needed it, but is it being assured that this won't happen any longer? Can you give me a wee bit of background about that, please? I mean, was this something which was quite usual in the past, or has it just been found in, perhaps it says one establishment, was that really perhaps happening across other establishments as well?
So thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Convener. I can assure you it's not widespread practice. The audit sampled in essence about 10% of our establishments, and it picked it up, I believe, in one of those establishments, and it was a well-known analgesic medication, although not prescribed. So when we discussed this with head teachers, a fairly quick conversation arranged after the audit report and the management actions were produced. The majority of head teachers in the room were quite surprised, very surprised that practice was in place in a particular establishment. So I'm pleased to say that it's not widespread. It didn't cause any harm to the child or the pupil involved. It's very low risk. However, it's absolutely clear in the procedures moving forward. It's a no-no, that it's only prescribed medication with that child's name on it, approved by the parent and the employees trained to administer it, that can be offered to a child. So absolutely assure you it's not widespread practice. Thank you.
Thanks for that reassurance. There's also stated in the report that there were issues about the storage of medication. Some was stored insecurely, and looking at some of the possible medications that we're talking about, some of the examples in the report, some of these are kind of significant drugs that we want to make sure are not going to be taken by anybody else by any error or by even theft, for example. So could you give again a bit more background about what measures have been taken to make sure the medication is securely stored? And again, are we going to continue to review that to make sure that it's easy to set some practice up in place to begin with, but then again, standards can slip. So just a bit more information about that, please.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, when the auditors perfectly factual to report that the medication in some of the schools sampled could have been stored with better security arrangements. Now, that doesn't imply that it's stored or was being stored in a manner where it was freely available for unauthorised use. The example I would give you is it was perhaps in the head teacher's office, but in a drawer that wasn't locked or what have you, or in the school office. So it had become custom and practice perhaps, and perhaps our standards had lapsed in terms of making sure that all these medications are kept under lock and key, or in a fridge under lock and key, for example. So moving forward, we have absolutely reinforced the need for medication to be stored, 1, out of reach of any children, 2, away from unauthorised persons, and 3, under lock and key. That's very clear in the guidance. It will be part of the Med 13 assurances that we're seeking from heads of establishment that has been implemented. We're going to be following the good practice that's already available in our early learning centres, where they got commended for their approach, and we're rolling that out across the estate. Again, head teachers in the main believe that they do treat the storage of medication very seriously, and they do have robust arrangements in place. Sometimes in a school office, perhaps there's limited space, or indeed in a wider school, and there are practicality issues. But we've raised it with head teachers. We're working with them, and as a service, as education service, it may be that we need to invest some more resource in providing adequate storage where that does not exist, and we find that still to be the case. Now, what I mean there is not that the medication's been stored openly, but perhaps as a service we could offer a standard approach to, for example, a piece of equipment, a storage cabinet, or something similar that's bespoke to that purpose. But at the moment, we're working with head teachers, and we're seeking assurances that all medication is kept in a secure place under lock and key. And from school to school, that will vary, but we will assure ourselves that those arrangements are adequate, fit for purpose, and compliant with our procedure, and where they're not, we'll take immediate action.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I think my colleague Councillor McKeeb actually wanted to follow on to some of that aspect. Brian, do you want to come in there? Or
thank you, Sarah. Thanks, convener. Yeah. When you look at the whole agenda item, seems a relatively small thing, but then it just grows arms and legs because we're talking about Med 1 forms, Med 2 forms, Med 4, Med 9s, Med 12s, Med 13s. What do they all mean? When you go and read into it a wee bit more, you see the reasons for them. Some of it may be to do with self-medication, some of it is to do with parental permissions being required, whatever. A couple of wee observations that I'll make first of all before asking a question. Councillor Patrick referred to, the use of analgesics. I don't particularly see that as being a problematic thing. A kid comes in complaining of a headache or whatever, so head teacher distributes. I don't see it's not massive. However, it falls totally foul of our policy and our insurance, our public liability. So I totally get why we need to bring an end to that. It's obviously happened with the best will in the world. There's nothing nefarious at the back of it, but it's a practice that we need to get a hold on. You then move into things where we're talking some serious drugs here, basically controlled drugs. So therefore the whole question of security is paramount as far as I would be concerned with that. I'm delighted to hear Jill, Kenny say that these new procedures in place. I just wonder though, I'm throwing the question out here. Is there a role here for an external, and I use the word monitor, engaged anywhere within this process? I don't believe, I know we're actually in the Audit Committee meeting here, and it's been picked up by Audit. I don't necessarily think it's an audit activity. I would much rather, I'd feel more secure if I was knowing that it was being handled by the service, and I know that we've expanded on it. Council leader alluded to, where, should we be looking across all council services, great point. But should we be considering an external monitor to come in and check the process, check the documentation, check that we have the procedures in place, and then be bringing them in
whether it's annually or whatever, to carry out some kind of monitoring. And it's only then when audit actually come in and carry out an audit of the paperwork.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. I really value those comments. Thank you. On the non-prescribed medications, as I've previously said, I can assure you it's not a widespread practice, and I believe the situation that was uncovered was had devolved and was well meant. However, it's been stopped. I just want to make you aware, though, under the Scottish Government guidance, there is still an opportunity for education services to obtain 2 types of medication that aren't prescribed to an individual child and have them in stock in a school. One is an inhaler, type of inhaler, and the second one's an EpiPen. And I think they're probably obvious reasons why you might want a stock of them. At the moment, we've developed a processes around ensuring that we have, for emergency type medications, a spare, and that parents provide a spare, so there's always a second option. Now, we're working that one through with schools, but I just wanted to be clear with you that the paracetamol was one end of the spectrum, but then we have the inhalers and the EpiPens, and we'll be working to take that forward. In terms of the audit function, I wouldn't want ever to talk for the audit manager, but I do value their opinion. And from my perspective, although it's not financial in terms of many of the things we do, like PEF and budget year ends and such like, it's about risk and managing risk, and that's one of the 3 legs of our audit team. There's the audit, risk and fraud, and this falls into the risk category. So I hope Isabel doesn't mind me just offering that piece of advice in terms of the role of audit, and it's particularly welcomed. In terms of taking it forward and bringing independence, education services, myself, Jill, we don't rest on our laurels. I'm already reaching out to my Association of Director Education Scotland colleagues, ADES, to seek support from my wider resources network colleagues, including Clackmannans, I beg your pardon, who have underwent a similar audit. And what I'm looking to do is, one, raise the profile with our ADES colleagues that this matter's been raised with Falkirk, and to take forward the lessons learned in Falkirk to share our practice with others. But I would also, through that process, we have a self-evaluation process where we invite other councils to come in and look at things like our devolved management scheme, like other resources matters within the council. And I will take your point on board and invite a colleague from another council to come and have a look at what we're doing, check it out, and let me know if they think the arrangements are as robust as theirs, or indeed they might take some good practice back to their own council. Jill and I have been talking about the role of the NHS here when they're in doing the training and such like. Yes, we can absolutely use that expertise locally as well. And finally, within our own service, I have an independent colleague who has a training role and a focus within early years, and has already offered me advice on how we could strengthen our guidance and improve the rollout of it. And I would be drawn on from that kind of independent review advice, because she's not been involved in the review. And Jill and I are able to take that advice on board. So definitely not resting on our laurels, definitely not patting ourselves on the back saying that's fine, job done. We do need independent scrutiny moving forward. And I would always welcome audit back in due course if they wanted to do a spot check, as they often do. But certainly I'll be looking at colleagues from other councils coming in and working with us to make sure our process is rolled out. Just one final comment on this, if you don't mind. I've also raised it with our trade union colleagues, and I'll be inviting them to come and be involved in checking how the procedures are being deployed across our estate, and they're more independent. They're independent thought, and they will tell me the truth. So involving them and rolling this out and talking to the staff who are involved, a bit like we're doing with the management of incidents in schools and such like, that'll give us an honest opinion of what's happening in schools. And of course, the final thing is we've got our parents, and as councillors will know, we've got a parent engagement strategy that's been refreshed. The first people that will tell us if there's something not right is them, and we'll continue to engage with them. But yeah, thank you for your comments, and if I've not answered your question, please let me know.
you answered about 20 of my questions there, Senny. No, it was excellent. Thank you very much. Just what you've you highlighted very eloquently there, you know, how this relatively simple process of medication actually does grow arms and legs. The two examples, you know, the inhalers and EpiPens and whatever, things that we possibly wouldn't have thought about, you know, but they fall under you know, the cover all of medication and how we control them in the school. It was only a suggestion, you know, just to say, you know, I feel that potentially there could be a role for an external, but again, the fact that you're talking to your colleagues in the sector, the idea of taking on board best practice, you've got it covered as far as I'm concerned. Thanks, Kenny. Thank you, convener.
Sorry, I know when to be quiet, honestly. It was just to say that also within our council, I'm looking at Marie on the screen with our Health and Social Care Partnership, and there are colleagues in there who I'm sure, if I asked for some help, would be quite, are always generous with their time to come and support education, and likewise, I would be happy to return the favour if the Health and Social Care Partnership or any other part of the council asks for some support around a particular thing, such as the medication arrangements and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to put that out there because, one, I forgot to mention it in my response.
Just sorry, Kavina, just a final wee thing. I forgot to mention, as far as Isabel is concerned, I'm hoping that you know, I take on board exactly that you say. It's the risk element that audit are really involved in. I'm just through that suggestion, you know, that to try and minimise that risk, so that Isabel's got an easier job. She comes in and it's already been taken care of. Thank you very much for your answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny. Isabel?
Making sure the mic's off this time. Yeah, the other thing first of all, I would just like to ask Kenny if he was looking for a change in direction in terms of his audit knowledge. Yes, our audit plan is risk-based. So when this audit came up, it was because obviously the significant risk to children. It was a deviation from the norm in terms of some of the work we do, but I would put it in the same arena as the Legionella arrangements and how the Legionella has grown so many arms and legs since the first review that we'd undertaken. And some of these issues would never come to light if we didn't change direction in our audit plans and look at some of the more obscure areas, however significantly risky. Councillor McCabe makes a very good point though. One of the things that we are always keen to do is, and what committee are looking for us to do, is provide more assurance, especially around reports where there are limited assurance or a no assurance. And that is generally to go back and look to see what improvements have been made and to give that independent opinion on whether things have moved on. Again, I would cite Legionella as one of those reports where we have gone back a few times and have provided a lot of detail around the improvements that have been required and the significant improvements that have been made. We can't do that in every audit. If we were doing that for every audit that had a limited or no assurance, we would never bring any new audits into the internal audit plan. So we can consider for future plans areas that we might want to follow up on and look at again, but we can't do that in every audit. So where there is some other management scrutiny or an external scrutiny, then that would be welcome. And the point Councillor McCabe made about then audit can go in and validate that information almost it would certainly reduce some of that workload on internal audit at that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. Councillor Hannah, do you?
Thank you, convener. Just wanted to take a step back to something that Kenny was saying earlier on. He made reference to the Med 1 and Med 2 forms. Now, one of the things that was identified in the audit was that these were sometimes incomplete, they were ambiguous. Now, what I would like to know is I would like some assurance that about the procedures that will be in place to ensure that incomplete or inadequate forms are not just filed, that they are actually flagged up and action is taken.
Bill. Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, as we've spoken about previously, a lot of this is around the quality assurance that happens after the issue of the documentation. So obviously, up until this point, we've spent extensive time benchmarking, quality assuring, researching, looking at national guidance, comparing where we were, looking at the Care Inspectorate guidance, etc. So a lot of the body of the work that we've done to date since the audit has been around the development of the guidance, the updating of the forms, and making sure that they are going to be fit for purpose to allow us to look at that. What happens now and what's important now is the quality assurance process that sits after that. We've spoken about the fact it's difficult for audit to continue to come in and continue that role in terms of quality assurance, but then we as a service have a statutory role in terms of quality assurance of that moving forward. So essentially, as part of this, we have set up quite robust quality assurance processes now to ensure that these actions are happening within establishments. Kenny's done a check in terms of the matching around the national standard, etc. And there are a lot of instances where our policy and our processes now exceed requirements in terms of the governance processes that sit there. So again, we will now, as part of a process, continue to rely on assurance statements from individual heads of establishment, having gone through the intricacies of the report and the guidance. We will ask the heads of establishment to provide us with assurances on an annual basis. So they will return a form to us or a signature on an annual basis to assure us that that is continually happening within schools. And then as a follow-up to that, kind of almost similar to an audit process, but on a more localised and internal basis, we will do a random sample of schools every year to do not an extensive audit to the level that's happened here, but a quality assurance process to ensure that the use of the forms correctly, the storage correctly, the training all in line. Obviously, we've had a sample of 7 schools undertaken through this audit process. We've not decided what a sample size will look like moving forward, but we would envisage that quality assurance process happens on an ongoing basis with an internal team. Kenny's spoken as well about external input. If we were looking at colleagues from other local authorities, then we could consider, we do have an internal officer who has been assigned this as a remit. We could look at external people to work with that colleague on that quality assurance process. So for me, it's around, I feel like we've done a substantial bit of work making sure that this is a really well forward-looking process with good guidance and opportunity for good governance. And it's then now about the governance process that sits around that and how we follow it up. I'm confident we're in a good place with this, and I feel we are going to keep it on an ongoing agenda. One of the things we've spoken about is whether we're now going to add this to our local risk register, so that we've got this sitting on our internal risk register and we're constantly reviewing it and making sure it's on the agenda all the time. So I'm confident we're in a really strong place thanks to this as an audit process. I feel like our guidance is very robust. As Kenny's pointed out, we're not sitting on it. It's not going to be a document that comes out of date very quickly. We're going to continually review it. And as we do that, then our quality assurance process that follows thereafter will continue to make sure that we've got compliance and adherence to all the forms and all the guidance.
So can I just clarify? Sorry if I'm being very picky about process, but so you're saying that head teachers would be responsible for ensuring that the Med 1 and Med 2 forms are properly completed, and that would come back to you through the Med 13?
Kenny.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor. We are aware from the audit that the completion of the Med 1s and the Med 2s, as you've highlighted, Councillor, had become, in some cases, not of a standard that we expected. And part of the, it could be pressures of work, it could have been a lack of information at the time, but we've tightened up on that and we've set it out in our guidance that it's absolutely required. So the first thing that's going to happen is the head teachers, heads of establishment, are going to be supported to return their confirmation that they've read the guidance and implemented it. The second thing that's going to happen is that there's going to be these quarterly reviews of the medication files for each child. And within the guidance, what I'm saying is I want the right forms held with the right medication in the right place so that it's accessible when you're administering the medication. And we don't have the forms stored, for example, and I'm being very simplistic here, but just to give you a flavour, I do not want the forms stored at the other end of the school if the medication's at that end of the school and the two aren't joined up. I'm not saying that would be the case. However, moving forward, the Med 1 and the Med 2 will be with the medication and will be checked each time the medication is administered to make sure that it's been completed. There will be quarterly reviews through the Med 14 process. And apologies for using all these Med form references, but people who know this system will recognise these numbers. Indeed, the Med 14 is a new form that we've brought in to bring about in-term review of medication, which is more aligned with what the care inspectorate requirements are, which were found to be excellent. So yes, we will, through the process, be making sure that these checks and balances are in place with the process. But furthermore to that, education, and I was just looking for it as Jill was talking there, we have put on our covering note to all heads of establishment, the exact words were, education services will monitor compliance with this guidance and may undertake proportionate assurance activity, including sampling of records and review of local procedures to ensure consistent implementation across establishments. So what that means for me is that I've asked my team and my links with secondary schools in early years to ensure that when they're out doing their visits to a primary school, for example, that my resource officer will have a checklist of things to ask that establishment are in place in regard to the administration of medication. Over and above that, the lead officer for this within education, and we have allocated it to one of my colleagues who's responsible for the bulk of the improvements that we're talking about, Lloyd Muir. Lloyd will be arranging to go to schools like Hall Glen and see what good practice looks like, but also to randomly identify or follow up, as Jill indicated previously, if we think there's a school where there could be further improvements because we've had a complaint or because we're looking at data, then Lloyd will be tasked with going out and spot checking that school and seeing how the compliance adds up. So it's not just a form that's in essence under the control of the captain of that ship. It's a process that brings in independent scrutiny of what's actually happened with the Med 1 and the Med 2.
Okay, thank you very much. Just one final question. Okay. There's reference in the audit report to reliance on CCTV as a witness for some controlled drug administrations, and that one establishment, it raised a question of a risk of undetected errors and may not meet legal or policy requirements. I wonder if you could say a little more about the policy and legal requirements and the use of CCTV in this respect, and secondly, how sure are we that this was just one establishment, and can we be assured of that?
So again, the similar to the analgesics, this I believe was in reference to a controlled drug, and we do have certain medication in schools that are identified as controlled drugs. There's a list of them provided by the UK government, and schools in the new guidance are required to check that. At the moment, we have two main kind of controlled drugs that are used, mainly around the children with additional needs. What we found in the occasion with this observation from our auditor was that the procedure that was in place at the time required 2 people to be in attendance, and there wasn't a staffing resource secondary to the person given it. Our new guidance makes it very clear that that's not acceptable moving forward, and that where it's a controlled drug, it must be administered by 2 people, one doing the administration, the other one doing the witnessing and the checking. The use of CCTV, I wasn't there, I don't know exactly what was said to the auditor or what happened, but I do not believe it is in any way a widespread practice across our estate that controlled drugs are not administered in accordance with our procedures, either as they stood at the time or as presented in the updated guidance. I don't want to say it was a one-off, I wouldn't say that, but I do believe it's not widespread practice, and it's been tackled in the new guidance moving forward.
Okay, thank you, convener.
Thank you, Kenny. I've got two final questions and then we'll stop for a break. The new guidance, two things. How are they being issued to trained staff? Are they being briefed and do you have them sign for it so you can show they've been briefed?
So at the moment, our communications have been through the heads of each establishment. Only yesterday I met with one of the heads of establishment, and as a result of that, I've now communicated the same guidance to all of our clerical staff in the schools. A lot of this takes place in the school office with the involvement of the head teacher and the clerical. So I've opened up the sharing of the guidance to a wider group of people beyond our senior leaders. Now, that's not always necessary because our heads of establishment do a great job in making sure their teams are advised of all of our information that's shared from the centre. But sometimes our heads of establishment, like everybody else, might have 16 meetings in a day and various incomings and need a bit of support. So it was through their suggestion that I thought we'll give it direct to the clericals so that we know that it's getting to them as well. In terms of signing off the people who need to use it, we do require that we get an acknowledgement that the guidance has been read by the individuals who are applying the guidance. And that's a new thing that we've introduced moving forward. Jill and I are doing quite a lot of work, Jill in particular, around what we call mandatory training and recording of that across the service. So whilst we're still developing that, for this particular instance, we do require mandatory reading of this guidance so that it's applied consistently and that supported by the training as well that's going in place. There may be a need moving forward just to reflect on what we learn over the next few weeks, early implementation of it, call people together, have briefing sessions, go out, teach people, so on and so forth. A couple of my team were just out meeting new clericals and new staff in schools, talking about training for CMIS and parent pay and school meals and such like. So that does happen as a regular occurrence. We'll factor this in. Just one final aspect of all of that is that we are reporting how we're doing with this to our Service Partnership Forum, which involves our trade union colleagues. And again, I'm reaching out to them to tell me if they're picking up any noise that would be something we could improve moving forward. Thank you.
The other part of that first question is, are you going to be regularly reviewing this guidance? And if so, what sort of period are we looking at?
Yes is the answer, convener. It's a dynamic document as I've described it. What that means to me is, as Jill says, it's not a document that's written and put on a shelf. The council is very forward thinking in its approach about making things happen now. We write a policy, we make sure it happens. So you might not believe me, but the guidance has already been updated with some changes. So as a result of issuing it, people are coming back and saying it would be better if. So I've got meetings ongoing in our early years colleagues, for example. The meeting with the head teacher the other day highlighted some really good practice that I hadn't thought about. And I'll tell you what it was. It was at the end of term that any unused medication, as simple as it might sound, gets handed back to the parent at the end of term to take it away for the summer holidays. Yeah. And then we start again in August so that it's not just kept in a drawer and then, dusted off and brought back out the following August. We've had many discussions about the disposal of medication, and it's not as easy as it might sound. So, that ongoing training, ongoing development of the policy, that's already started, I'm pleased to say. And I'm really pleased as an officer of the council and proud of my team that we've managed to take forward the management action plan with Jill's support and put in place robust guidance. I'm not going to pretend that it'll ever be 100% perfect straight away, but it is consistent and it's been applied across all schools. And indeed, as Jill says, in many ways it exceeds what we were asked to do, but quite rightly so.
Thank you, Kenny. My final question, and I've got a couple of observations with it. Do your education establishments have first aiders, trained first aiders?
Yes, they do.
Point picked up by Councillor McCabe. I'm a qualified first aider myself. The analgesics question, it's actually against First Aid Act that you're allowed, first aiders aren't allowed to carry even simple paracetamol as well. So just as an observation, Councillor McCabe. I've lost my train of thought now.
If you don't mind me saying so, Convener, the first aid in schools, there's always going to be a designated first aider, which is in line with our role as an employer of people, that in any site you have a designated first aider, either the one who's had the really advanced training or the basic training. But also in our schools, our support for learning assistants have a responsibility for the administration of basic first aid to the children. That's where that ties in. In our more complex settings, we have support for learning assistants that do more specialised first aid and administration of medication, the grade E's, so on and so forth. And just on the kind of references to first aid, I'm really pleased to say that the director took the decision last year to implement defibrillators in all of our schools for public access arrangements and so on and so forth. So that's some good news too around this whole area of activity.
That is good news, because that is now part of the first aid training. That was the last training, my last refresher. I've remembered my final point now. I'm glad to hear you talking to the trade unions. I was for 30 years myself a senior health and safety rep, and tying in with the first aid and your spot checks and things. It's only a suggestion. I'm not telling you how to do things, but health and safety reps can be sometimes another useful, because they're supposed to do 3 monthly checks of health and safety anyway. And I know part of my remit, I very much check things like first aid boxes, defibrillators and what have you. Just might be a suggestion for you.
It's an excellent suggestion, and any suggestions always welcomed in this forum. We do have a council safety management group where trade union reps at the kind of more senior level within the council are represented, and they are aware of this as they are aware of other matters like the premises management and such like. It's front and centre in terms of our operational arrangements. Trade unions are involved, and I take a lot of pride from saying to you that we have good relationships with trade unions in Falkirk, and when they come to me or Jill and say that something's going well or not so well or could be made better, then we take that on board.
They'll probably wish I never promoted them, but never mind.
Not at all, not at all.
Thank you very
thank
much.
you.
Anyone else have any further questions? No? Are we happy to note and agree this report? Right, we're just going to take a small comfort break of 15 minutes.
Can I just ask before we do?
Sorry, Brian.
Just to clarify, sorry to delay everybody's comfort break by an extra 30 seconds, 35 seconds now. You did ask for the action plan to be sent back to this to the next meeting, but to show the actions will be complete, so that'll come in as part of the decision.
See everybody in 15 minutes.
What's the time?
Okay, welcome back. As it's the last item on the agenda, we'll try and keep questions and answers as brief as possible, but succinct. Okay, back to you again, Isabel. You're going to
Yes.
need a long glass of water or a bottle of wine after today.
Yes, so last one for today. The final report from Internal Audit sets out a proposed programme of work for 26-27 for your approval. Paragraphs 3.1 to 3.3 highlight the requirement of the preparation of a risk-based internal audit plan as part of the Global Internal Audit Standards, and that in agreeing the plan, committee should be aware that the priorities and internal audit resource could change over the course of 26-27. Therefore, the plan must be considered flexible. At paragraph 4.3, I've stated that I'll give a verbal update on the negotiations regarding the continuation of the internal audit service to Clackmannanshire Council. So the collaboration work with Clackmannanshire Council and Stirling Council is underway, as you well know. There is a joint working agreement in place with Clackmannanshire Council currently, and that has been drafted for 26-27, but hasn't been finalised yet. Negotiations are ongoing, and it's because some of the elements within the agreement have an impact for the wider collaboration. So there's some legal information and advice required. So a further update will be provided at the next committee if we get that moved on in time for that. So the risk approach and the resources and reporting arrangements are in sections 4. Specifically paragraphs 4.1 to 4.6, which provide detail of what makes up the preparation of the plan, including the audit universe that we have, which can be seen at Appendix 1, as well as the Global Internal Audit Standards topical requirements, which are a new aspect, and also the introduction of a key of priorities. The table at paragraph 4.10 summarises the resources we have got available for delivering our planned programme of work at Falkirk Council. The table is split into 4 categories with fuller details, including an additional category of indirect audit time at paragraph 4.11. This year we've also provided planned direct audit days per assignment in compliance with our standards. The assignments that make up each element of the plan are set out at appendices 2 and 3. I've tried to give a little bit of detail on what the scope for each is likely to be, though again this may change over the course of the year once we start properly planning our assignments. The process for planning, undertaking and reporting on each individual assignment will broadly remain the same as in previous years, and that's set out at paragraphs 4.12 to 4.17. This does include an additional preliminary planning stage documented at paragraph 4.12 in line with the Global Internal Audit Standards. Paragraph 4.18 highlights that each year an internal audit annual assurance report is presented to committee. Internal audit will give an overall opinion on the Council's risk management, governance and control arrangements based on the work that internal audit has carried out over the course of the year, and that will come to the next audit committee in June, as we mentioned earlier. The report will also include a summary of all the work that we've undertaken in 25-26. The internal audit plan has already been shared with the corporate management team and audit committee members to ensure that views were sought and reflected if possible. The feedback that was received was positive and did not require any changes to the proposed plan. I draw your attention to the recommendations at paragraph 2.1. In particular, can I ask that committee approves the internal audit plan for the year, but to bear in mind that the resources available to internal audit and the need for the plan is flexible. Internal audit will direct resources to where they're most needed, and progress will be reported to audit committee on an ongoing basis. I'd like to thank the internal audit team yet again for their input to the drafting of this plan, as well as to council services and members for their input. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Isabel. Can I commend your team for the new format of the report, firstly? And secondly, it says the estimated total audit days are for complete audit assignments. I'm just wondering how many audit days are available among the team each year.
Okay, so the planned days that come in the plan, the planned days that come in the plan are different year on year depending on the resources that are available. The starting point is always the same in the sense of a full-time member of staff and what their availability is. So that starts off as a standard amount of days, where we then remove the indirect time. So indirect time is things like training, development, leave, absence. So we put in a standard percentage for that, which is the same every year. We start from the same base point, and that gives us a number of days. So our number of days per full-time person is 195 days for working time, and that's where we start. But the reason it then changes year on year is dependent on what is happening and what our circumstances are. For example, we have a part-time member of staff, so they are not starting from the same place. They don't have that number of days to start with, so there's a reduction there at that point straight away. If, for example, we lost a member of staff during the year and we hadn't replaced them at the time of the plan, we wouldn't have them to add into the plan. If, for example, we had a new member of staff and they had started part year, we wouldn't have the same number of days again to allocate. Or if they were new to audit or a local authority, we would reduce their direct audit time, but increase their indirect time because they would need more induction, more training, whatever extra that they required. So it can look different year on year because of those reasons, but the starting point and the process that we go through to get that number of days is the same. It's pretty static. It is just down to circumstance.
Thank you, Isabel. Councillor Miko, John.
Thank you. Isabel, we've got 23 committed assignments, 14 of which have been designated as a priority 1, which seems a high number. Is that likely to be completed in this year? And can you say a wee bit about how the priority 1s, 2s and 3s have come about and what that actually means? Because if we go to page 105, we've got priority 3s in the first 6 months, but then we've got others that are deferred, that are priority 1s in the latter of the 6 months. Could you maybe give a bit of an explanation about how that all fits together, and how you decide on what's a priority, and if anything has to be dropped, what risks are associated with that?
Okay. So, yes, the number of assignments that are at priority 1, it's not all of them are audit reports, or some of them. So our plan is made up of assignments, so all the different areas of work that we have to do, but not all of those assignments are result in an audit report, because it's all the extra work that we do. So it could be around the global internal audit standards, for example. It could be to do with the assessment. The plan is the aim of the plan is to be as transparent as possible, so that we can give you that information for your scrutiny as to how our time is made up, and not all of that is on the audit reports that you see in front of you. And I think what this morning's conversation so far have really evidenced that in terms of all the additional work that we do. So they're not all going to end up in an audit report. So some of the work there is ongoing or at certain points of the year that we'll have to undertake. The bigger issue and what you're asking is what we've already spoken about this morning in terms of the number of audit reports that we can get completed in the year, and I think we've already spoken about that quite a lot this morning. So the priorities, this was an attempt to show why these particular items were in there, and they were graded 1, 2 and 3. It came about from a request from Clackmannanshire Council Audit and Scrutiny Committee members last year. They wanted a feeling for why things ended up in there. And so this was to try and show our thinking as to why things were there. You're right that there's things that are priority 1 that aren't being done till the second half of the year. And there's things you mentioned as if grade 3 audit in the first part of the year. So I'll pick that one just to try and explain it a wee bit more. So the one you referred to was A10, which was the 25-26 carry forward. So that was in there as a priority 3 because of its risk value. Bearing in mind our risk-based plan is looks at all of the risks. So as to why things are in the plan, which is all the other audit reports. This bit, this carry forward, is something that we need to do. So it's not directly impacted in 26-27, but there is an indirect impact because we need to finish the work that we've still got progressing in 25-26. The transparency around the plan is better this year because that normally wouldn't show. So this is a bit of me providing support to the internal audit team to have that work that's still ongoing recognised in the plan for the number of days that it takes to do it. So, for example, it's in there as an estimated days for 35. We've already spoken about some of the work that will be undertaken in that 35 days, and that is the Pupil Equity Fund audit, the Madison audit, and we still have Falkirk Integration Joint Board work to complete for their part of the programme. So we can't put that into the second part of the year. It still has to be in the first part of the year because it needs to be done because it was 25-26. You could argue it's a key priority, and because it needs to be done, and it's one of the that work's ongoing, it's already happening. But in the grander scheme of our priorities and what we're assessing as the risks to the other audit reports, those are greater because they are new on the plan. So I think what I'm trying to get over is that things are movable in the plan, and that's about trying to allocate where the best fit. And I think what I said earlier on this morning was it depends on what needs to be done and when it needs to be done and what the service commitments are, what our auditor commitments are. So this will potentially change. I already know that there's an element of where an audit may have to come up quicker. Already in the time since this has been printed, there's an audit in for the second part of the year that I know potentially is going to have to now come into the first part of the year, and that will impact in what I'm presenting to you today, in the sense that it will one of those will have to be moved because we won't be able to achieve another one in that same time frame. So, but that's why we report progress to Audit Committee. That's why we give you the updates, and we'll keep you informed about what changes and what needs to be moved if that's relevant. Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Dina, could I just ask that there's maybe a wee footnote when these come back about what the priorities 1, 2 and 3 mean, just so there's transparency, because these are public papers and people might therefore assume priority 1 means higher up a priority where it doesn't appear like that when it's coming forward. So I just think it'd be helpful just to have a wee footnote to what that actually means.
Could we do that, Isabel?
We actually have that in there. The key of priorities is in Appendix 2 and in Appendix 3. So there are details on how each of them have come about and what they cover, but it may be that you feel they need maybe more development, but you can let me know if that's the case. But certainly the information is there.
Okay. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Convener. Just a straightforward question about Appendix 3. There's reference in there to the estimated days that we committed to Falkirk Integration Joint Board and the Falkirk Pension Fund, but I see no reference to some of the other clients, like the Stirling and Clacks Integration Joint Board, the Clacks Council, and the Valuation Joint Board. Is that an omission because there were no days allocated, or has that been taken into account in some other way?
Yeah. So this is the Falkirk Council plan specifically. So this is the element of the resources that we have to provide for Falkirk and the organisations that are linked to Falkirk, which are the Pension Fund and the Integration Joint Board. Clackmannanshire Council have a separate plan, and their organisations are linked to that, which includes Central Scotland Valuation Joint Board and the Clackmannanshire and Stirling Integration Joint Board. So theirs is a separate plan with a separate allocation. So obviously, Amanda and both of us mentioned this morning that Clackmannanshire have a full-time internal auditor there. So we have an allocation for that auditor, which sits separately. They work they don't work 37 hours a week, so there's a different number of days that is allocated to them. So it all gets a wee bit complicated, but it's a pretty standard process year on year. And we provide the service of another full-time equivalent, regardless of how that's made up. That can be made up of time that I take with audit committees in preparation of reports, briefings with members, or it can be through the work of the senior internal auditor from Falkirk, or indeed any member of the internal audit team at Falkirk. So that one allocation is removed and not part of the Falkirk Council plan. So Clackmannanshire is treated very separately. So when you're obviously getting this plan for approval, Clackmannanshire are getting their plan for approval at their next committee, which is at the beginning of June.
It maybe just needs referenced in this report because your team are Falkirk Council staff, that there is a commitment there. But can pick that up for future reference.
Yeah, I think it is there, but I'm just not quite sure what paragraph it is off the top of my head. But if it's not, certainly, yeah.
Thank you, Isabel. Do we have any further questions? No? I'm just going to finish with a couple of notes. One, thank you yet again for you and your team and the work you do. It is immensely appreciated. As you know, I'm an auditor myself. I know what goes into it. I've been on both sides of the field myself. So thank you very much. And my last noting, I've noted that obviously the EQA assessor noted regarding the flexibility and resourcing. So I'm just noting that I will certainly be monitoring resources with my health and safety hat on. But other than that, thank you very much, everybody. Are we happy to note and agree that final report? Thank you very much. Time for the sunshine. That's the end of the meeting.
Thank you.